Bill Gates is worth over $100 billion, and the watch on his wrist costs about 50. It's a Casio, the same dive watch a teenager buys with birthday money, and he wears it to meetings where everyone else is checking their Rolex. That's the story. At least, that's the story the internet sells you. That real money hides, that the truly rich all quietly wear nothing. It's a good story. It's also only half true. Because the actual watches worn by genuinely wealthy people are stranger, quieter, and far more deliberate than the quiet luxury crowd wants you to believe. These are 7 watches rich people actually reach for. Why each one reads as invisible, and the one that will surprise you most sits right in the middle. Number 1. The Rolex Explorer. Walk into a room full of serious money and start counting Rolexes. You'll find Submariners, you'll find Daytonas, you'll find the gold day-date that Warren Buffett actually wears. And then you'll find the one guy whose Rolex you almost miss completely. Black dial, no date, 3 little numbers, a steel bracelet, 36 millimeters of almost nothing. That's the Explorer, and it is the plainest watch in the entire Rolex catalog, on purpose. The Explorer's whole identity was built in 1953, the year a British team put the first 2 men on the summit of Everest, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Rolex equipped that expedition and launched the Explorer off the back of it. Here's the detail almost everyone missed, though. The watch that actually reached the top may not have been the Rolex at all. A British brand called Smiths has a very strong claim to Hillary's wrist, and Rolex has quietly let the Everest legend do the marketing for 70 years anyway, which tells you exactly how this game gets played at the top. The pre-Explorer that did go on the expedition now sits behind glass in a museum in Zurich. The watch you can actually buy runs somewhere around $7,000 to $8,000 new, less than half what a hyped steel sports Rolex trades for. No gold, no diamonds, no waitlist theater. Collectors have a nickname for a watch like this. They call it a go anywhere, do anything watch. The one you could wear up a mountain or under a tuxedo and never think about. So a guy who could buy any Rolex ever made chooses the one that looks like he spent nothing. He wears it turned slightly inward, mentions it to no one, and that silence is the entire point. Number 2. The Cartier Tank. Picture a small rectangular watch sitting flat under a shirt cuff on some of the most photographed wrists of the last 100 years. Jackie Kennedy wore hers almost every single day. Andy Warhol owned one and openly admitted he never even set the time. He wore it, he said, simply because it was the watch to wear. Princess Diana wore one, Muhammad Ali wore one, Steve McQueen wore one, Yves Saint Laurent wore one, Michelle Obama wore one in her official White House portrait. Louis Cartier designed the tank in 1917, and the shape came from an unlikely place, the top-down outline of a Renault tank crawling across a First World War battlefield. He gifted an early one to an American general, and by 1919 it was in production. Now here's what makes it a rich person watch instead of a flashy one. The tank has looked essentially the same for over a century. It does not announce a price. A steel quartz tank starts around $3,000. A gold one climbs into the tens of thousands. And to almost everyone in the room, they read as the identical watch. Jackie Kennedy's personal tank later sold at auction for around $380,000, bought by Kim Kardashian. That's the same silhouette you could pick up new for about $3,000. That gap between what it looks like and what it can quietly cost is the whole trick. The tank never tells the room who's rich. It just sorts the people who know from the people who don't, and it does it without saying a word. Number 3. The Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso. This one has been whispering instead of shouting for almost 100 years, and it was born on a polo field. In 1930, a Swiss businessman named César Dutré was in India watching British Army officers play polo, and they kept smashing the crystals on their watches mid-match. So he had an idea. A watch with a case that flips completely over on itself, dial down, so the metal back takes the hit instead of the glass. The name Reverso is just Latin for I turn. By 1931, it was patented, wrapped in clean Art Deco lines, and it has barely changed since. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expects. Because the Reverso literally turns inward and hides its own face, it became the favorite of people who were never trying to be seen in the first place. General Douglas MacArthur owned one. Then something strange happened. After the Second World War, round watches took over. The Reverso fell out of fashion, and Jaeger-LeCoultre basically stopped making it. It was nearly forgotten until the 1970s, when an Italian distributor stumbled onto a pile of unused vintage Reverso cases sitting in the factory and brought the whole design back from the dead. A steel one starts around $7,000 to $10,000. Gold versions climb well past that, and vintage first-generation pieces trade around $15,000 to $22,000. The Reverso's real flex is that you can flip it blank and wear a watch that shows the world nothing at all. There's even a footnote that ties this whole list together. In 1932, the same casemaker sold a batch of Reverso cases to Patek Philippe, and the man running Jaeger-LeCoultre at the time sat on Patek's board. The quiet watches, it turns out, were always talking to each other. Hold on to that, because Patek is coming back later. Number 4, and this is the one I told you to wait for. Sometimes the watch on the richest wrist in the room is a beat-up Casio. We already met Bill Gates and his $50 Casio Duro, a plastic and steel quartz dive watch you can buy on Amazon this afternoon. He has worn it for years at Davos, in interviews, in photos, while running a foundation that gives away billions. He's also been spotted in a scratched-up G-Shock. This is a man who could buy the watch company. He wears the watch a lifeguard wears. And here's the part the quiet luxury crowd leaves out, because it wrecks their tidy little story. People think they've cracked the pattern. Rich equals humble. Rich equals cheap watch. Rich equals a Casio. They're wrong. Warren Buffett, the patron saint of frugality, drives a modest car and wears a solid gold Rolex Day-Date worth around $25,000. Mark Zuckerberg, king of the gray t-shirt, quietly commissioned a watch from Grubel Forsey that reportedly cost around $900,000. Steve Jobs wore a cheap quartz Seiko. Jeff Bezos wears a Ulysse Nardin most people couldn't name. So which is it? The answer is that past a certain level of money, the watch stops being a scoreboard entirely. Some of them buy a $900,000 movement almost no one will ever recognize. Some buy a $50 Casio for the exact same reason. Both wrists are saying the exact same thing. I am not dressing for you, and I don't need you to know what this cost. The old field watch on a worn nylon strap, the beat-up Hamilton khaki, the dead simple Casio, those aren't poverty. At the very top, they're the loudest possible way to signal you have genuinely nothing left to prove. Quick thing before the back half. If you're the kind of person who'd rather know what's real than what's trending, go ahead and subscribe. No hype, no affiliate links, just the truth about watches. Alright, here's where it gets quietly ridiculous. Number 5. The Grand Seiko Snowflake. This is the watch almost nobody outside the hobby recognizes, and that is precisely why the right people love it. From across the table, it looks like a plain white-dialed watch. Lean in, and the dial isn't white at all. It's textured like windswept snow on a mountainside, and it isn't painted on. It's built through a silver plating process, so the surface actually catches light the way real snow does. It's made by hand in a small studio in the mountains of Nagano in Japan, using a polishing technique called zaratsu that comes from Japanese sword making and takes years to master. Craftsmen spend hours mirror polishing a single case until the reflection has zero distortion. The hands and markers are finished to a standard reviewers openly say beats Swiss watches costing 3 and 4 times more. It also happens to be one of the most accurate mechanical style watches on Earth, drifting only about a second a day, while famous Swiss brands are happy with 5 or 10 seconds a day. And for most of its life, this watch didn't even wear the Grand Seiko name on its own. It hid under the ordinary Seiko logo, which somehow made it even more invisible to anyone who didn't already know to look. And here's the number that matters. The Snowflake sells for around $6,000, and it delivers finishing that genuinely embarrasses watches at $20,000 and up. But there's no logo drama, no status shortcut, no one across the room going wide-eyed, because almost nobody knows what it is. Pay attention to this next part, because it explains the whole psychology of this list. The Snowflake gives you nothing to show off and everything to quietly know. Wearing one is a private conversation with yourself and maybe 2 other people on Earth who'll ever notice. To these buyers, that isn't a downside. That's the entire feature. Number 6, and I promised you Patek would come back, the vintage Patek Philippe Calatrava. In 1932, the Stern family bought Patek Philippe in the middle of the Great Depression, with the company on the edge of collapse. The first watch they built was the Reference 96, a thin, round gold watch with a plain dial and two hands. That's it. No date, no complications, nothing to stare at. They based it on the Bauhaus idea that form should follow function, and that simple little watch quietly became the blueprint almost every dress watch since has copied. It also helped save the company. One detail here is worth sitting with. A vintage Calatrava is small, thin, precious metal, often decades old, and it slides completely out of sight under a shirt cuff. It is the physical opposite of a statement watch, and that is exactly the statement. Patek made that original reference for over 40 years, from 1932 all the way to the 1970s, and prices today are all over the map. A vintage 96 can run anywhere from $10,000 to well over $100,000 depending on the example, and a modern Calatrava starts around $30,000. Now, connect the dots from earlier. The early Calatravas actually used movements built by Jaeger-LeCoultre, the same house that made the Reverso. The quietest watches on this entire list were made by the same small circle of people, for the same small circle of people. A Calatrava under a cuff is invisible to 99 people out of 100. The 100th person catches a flash of thin gold, knows exactly what it is and exactly what it cost, and says absolutely nothing. Some versions even hide a second little cover over the back, an officer's caseback, so the beautiful movement stays a secret the owner keeps even from the people looking at the watch. That silent recognition, the flash only one person in 100 can read, is what the money is actually paying for. Number 7, and it's really two watches because they tell the same story from opposite ends of the price ladder, and both were reborn from a divided country. When the Berlin Wall fell and Germany reunified, a little town called Glashütte came back to life as a watchmaking capital. In 1990, two things happened there at once. A man named Walter Lange revived his family's brand, a Lange and Zona, a name the Soviets had wiped off the map decades earlier. He re-registered it 145 years to the day after his great-grandfather founded the original. And a brand new company called Nomos was born just down the road. The Lange Saxonia is money that refuses to explain itself. Plain silver dial, two hands, hand-finished to a level the wider world will never see. Right down to a balance bridge that's engraved by hand, one watch at a time. Lange makes only a few thousand of these a year. It runs roughly $16,000 to $23,000, and it's recognized by almost no one outside a tiny circle who understand exactly what it costs to look this restrained. And then there's the Nomos Tangente, clean Bauhaus design, made in that same town, that you can actually own for around $2,000. Same philosophy, taste chosen over a name shouting off the dial, at a tenth of the price. That's the single watch on this whole list a normal person could realistically own, and it comes from the exact same town, born the exact same year, chasing the exact same idea as a Lange that costs 10 times more. Here's what all 7 of these have in common. Not one of them is trying to be seen. And that's the quiet joke of real wealth. The louder the watch, the more it's asking the room for permission. The quietest watches on earth get worn by the people who stopped needing it. So the real question was never, which watch says you made it? It's who you're still trying to convince. The people at the very top already answered that a long time ago. They just did it with a watch you would have walked right past without a second look. And that, more than any price tag, is the actual flex.